These are the books I'm reading. 1984, I am page 159. I read it in high school, but I don't remember. So, very much on theme. Amusing Ourselves to Death, page 35. But I'm kind of skipping around because I'm insane. And then I'm reading Anna Karenina. This is a book I've been reading since December, working through it. This, I'm at 246. All these books are from the library. And I love fiction. I love reading fiction. I deleted my Goodreads, December 2025. I ended up getting this small notebook, sort of like a reading log, and I keep track of all the books that I'm reading. So 2025, I read Candoras, The Secret History, Small Things Like This, Men We Reaped, The Scum Villain Self-Saving System, 1, 2, 3, 4, Agua Viva, Time is a Mother, Changing Planes, The Hour of the Star, Blood Child, Intimations, So Sad Today, The World Keeps Ending, Self-Reliance, The Queer Art of Failure, Tomorrow, 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 Your Money or Your Life, Nick and Charlie, Swan's Way, Filter World, Severance, Love That Dog, Fake Dates and Mooncakes, The Dutch House, Ace, Bonjour Triste, Bliss Montage, Sula, Black Friend Essays, The Power of Now, The Year of Magical Thinking, Techno-Feudalism, The Quiet After, The Revenge of Analog, A Marvelous Light, and The Salt Eaters by Toni Cade Bambara. I used to be like a self-help book fanatic. I used to read everything from Atomic Habits, The 7 Effective. I read them all in a row, and something that was consistent and was a pattern in my life was I was having an issue with just like life, right? Like I was really struggling, and you know, that's, I don't think that really never really stops living in a human life and a human body. I found that the self-help books somehow made me worse. Even though it's supposed to help you, it actually made me feel empty. It made me feel like I just ate a bunch of nothing. And even though I was reading these like revolutionary books, then everything they were talking about to me felt very like individualistic. They were creating an infrastructure of like how to grind and hustle, create another passive income and another passive income and then another passive income. It is also trying to make you a better cog in the machine. It is not telling you that failure is okay. It's always telling you like, actually like go after this thing and do it well, and if you don't do it well then you're not a badass. It's a bunch of placation. It's a bunch of like sweet nothings that I felt were not really helping me, because when I was younger I was reading a lot of books that were fiction particularly, and I had so much fun and I always felt like satiated, and I also wrote a lot because I was inspired by what I was reading. Fast forward to my early 20s, I found myself like reading all these self-help books written by primarily white men, had a bunch of stuff handed to them for the most part, or they just got lucky, because most of life is luck, and people, you know, were kind of like giving this like universal advice that worked for them, but they were giving it away like a gospel, and I wasn't that church. I stopped reading self-help books, and I think that shifted the way I was engaging with the world in a large way. I think something that happened when I started to read fiction primarily, and I do read a lot of nonfiction books too, but they're not self-help books, or they're not telling me like how to live and all these things. Maybe I'll put like 1 or 2 if someone recommended it. Like I think this year I read like Your Money or Your Life, and I found it so empty. I was like, oh, like this is such a confirmation bias for me not to continue to read books like this, because the beginning was sort of like Americans are like built to be consumer, and was like, this is how you take control and exonerate the systems, and I'm like, yeah, that's not for me. And so when I started to read books like Anna Karenina, I started to read books that are very smutty, like The Scum Villain Saving System, which is a world building that has a lot of fantasy and Chinese martial arts like history and stuff like that. I found myself kind of be reinvigorated, but I also started to notice patterns. I think something that we don't talk about often is that there is almost this hierarchy of like who is reading fiction. Fiction books are, they keep getting written, and authors continue to write them because they want to say something about the world. I think self-help books are very agenda machine, whereas like fiction books, you're able to extract things that you see and how you interact with the world. You notice patterns, you notice things, nothing feels new. I'm reading Anna Karenina right now, and it's a Russian aristocratic society in the late 1800s. The story is framed around like romance and affair and stuff like that. And the backdrop is about like this lower class, upper class dynamic, and how the educated class sees the non-educated class, and like excess and wealth, and like living in solitude, and how your personhood is impacted by who you are surrounded by. These are very, very universal themes. So one of the things that I notice a lot about in my reading of fiction is that it allows me to actually contextualize the world I'm in deeper and deeper. And I feel like there is a reason that I picked up, you know, when I was 13, when I was 14, and I was reading all these like vampiric books about like structure and all these things. At the time I was like, oh, escapism or whatever, but you really think about it, the backdrop is always about like power and dynamics and like all of these things, right? Like even if it's like very, very like frivolous topics. I think the other reason that I feel that it's important to read books in general, not just fiction, but like any book, anything to physically read, is that you're supporting your public library. And of course, you can also do ebooks, you can do audiobooks and stuff like that from your library. I just saw that Spotify came up with physical books that they're going to release, or like they're going to start selling or something from, if you buy the book. I don't know what's going on. This is so dystopian. One of the last third places in this country, which is libraries. Libraries are a free place that you can go get resources. Depending on the library, there's like seeds you can get, there's like teen centers, there's computers that you can use, printing, you can fax stuff sometimes. I think being able to read, even if you don't read, you just like go to and check out a bunch of books. You might read one book or something a year. That's amazing. But the fact that you're supporting your public library instead of like going to these big companies that are like doing subscription services or trying to continue to withdraw you from your community, your local community, I think that's something that I am very fearful of, and I'm continually like very much like back in my day. If you look at it, the public libraries in general in the country are getting their budget slashed and cut and defunded over and over again. Depending on where you are, there's such a lack of attending and coming to the libraries, because the library it's a beast. It's an infrastructure of information and resources, and the rise of anti-intellectualism and AI generated content and AI generated emails. I feel like the library is one of the most revolutionary places we have left. I think also people are like, well, I want to read human psychology and stuff. It's cool. I think I love human psychology, but I think some of the most times that I have read about human psychology and understood humans in general, and I have understood myself, is by reading fiction. I'm reading again like 1984 right now. I haven't read this since high school. In the United States, there is a rise of authoritarianism and, you know, this narrative shifting, erasure, dismemory that's happening. This book was written in the 1950s, I believe, and it is all a prophecy. And to me, this book is a testimony of like, and it's not just this book. You can read so many other books that also talk about like dismemory and all of those things. I just ended up picking this up because I don't really remember what I read in high school. It allows me to understand like how humans actually desire autonomy and freedom, and it's a confirmation bias of like what we seek and what we desire is very common, and it's very empathizing, it's very sympathizing, and it's also like, yeah, okay, like I'm not crazy. It allows you to be more present and here. And I think like for you not to reject like this is all new, this is the first time this has ever been discussed, humans have acted in this way, humans have been taken apart and disseminated by authoritarianism and control for many millennia. So this is just one tiny testimony of that, and it's really cool to see that from a fictional book that has so much backdrop that feels very familiar to us here in 2026. I think also, I mean, the world is scary. It can be scary. I love escapism. And what I've noticed in the last few years is that my escapism has gotten to be less satiating, because when I used to do escapism, or like I used to do scrapbooks, I used to do journaling, I used to go out and talk to my friends and FaceTime with my friends. When I'm not doing that though, what I found myself doing was like binge watching or scrolling. At the end of that, I felt empty. I felt like I did not eat anything. You know, when you're like really, really hungry, that's what I felt like. I felt like something was glazing over me. So for me, specifically fiction books and non-fiction books too, but like specifically fiction books allow me to escape, because it's not necessarily about understanding the world. I love reading smut. I love reading like romantic, fluffy books and stuff like that, because it allows me to just like get lost in a story. To kind of be invited into someone else's world is actually sometimes lovely, because at the end of the day, it's like really about like imaginations and world building. So to be able to kind of be brought up into those worlds is actually like a form of escapism that I value deeply. Like when I am on Instagram Reels or something, I love it. Like it's a great place to be, but after a while, I'm kind of like, okay, this is the same joke in different fonts. I find myself getting physically and mentally tired, and my heart is not in it, if that makes sense. I think books kind of fulfill. I think reading is very much an act of resistance. I know maybe like I am overblowing this out of proportion, but I'm not. I know I'm not. Algorithm-less, non-tracking activities, non-eye tracking behavior, non-surveilling activities, whatever it is a resistant act. When I'm reading a book, my eyes are not being like tracked by these algorithms, like, oh, where is she paying attention, where is she lingering. I'm just there. These algorithms have gotten so sophisticated. When you're on specific videos longer, they're like, oh, like even if you don't click on it, you're just like looking at it longer. There's like the tracking has gotten so sophisticated that it will offer you and feed you that more and more and more. So if you're watching a lot of like rage videos or a lot of like angering, sad videos, it's gonna feed you more and more, and it's gonna get you to a point of like sadness and hopelessness about the world. To be in that place and also know that my brain is not getting worse, even if like it takes me like a while to read one page or one chapter, at least I know that my brain is not being tracked, my neural pathways are not being impacted, and I'm not thinking about, oh, in 5 years, you know, this is fried or whatever. Like I'm just not having this existential thought every time I'm reading. Whereas when I am scrolling or when I am watching something for longer period of time, I am getting deeply, deeply existential to the point that it's actually like impacts me the next few days. In the last few years, again, there is this thing that happens when you're having a conversation with your friends and, you know, oh, I saw this TikTok, or I saw this YouTube, or I saw this meme. I feel like we're kind of brain rotting together. And as much as I love memes, I love, you know, all these reels and videos and stuff like that, sometimes I want our conversations to leave outside of these memes and reels and stuff that we're sending, right? I think there's like a joy in that. I just think about like the way that anti-intellectualism has really taken us by the throat. And anti-intellectualism, the tentacles are everywhere. This monster of anti-intellectualism is everywhere. Oh, you want to summarize your email? You don't even have to read this whole email. This one email exchange with someone. Oh, don't worry, that Gemini will do that for you. Oh, this tweet doesn't make sense. Grok can summarize it for you. Everything they want us to outsource everything to them, to these tools, with an illusion of convenience and ease. But in reality, it is making us, I think, less critical and making us more numb. It's making us more desensitized. It's making us devoid of original thoughts. We're regurgitating things that are happening only on our feed and our For You page, and those are the only things that matter. It doesn't allow us to go outside of that and actually explore, like, okay, let me actually think about this. Either we're going in this weird like pipeline of conspiracy theory madness, or we're going in this like tirade of like everybody's stupid, there's an anti-intellectualism, things are horrible, humanity is destroying itself. It's a very like distant apathetic way of looking at the world. And I feel like when you are reading anything, with the exception of self-help stuff, I feel like a lot of the time you're kind of like, let's critically think about this. Why haven't I been able to see my friends? Have I been spending time doing like that thing or this thing? You're able to critically assess things in a much more like, I think, objective way, rather than like regurgitating what you've heard and kind of like, oh, the loneliness epidemic is so bad, nobody's able to find their partner, all women are horrible, all men are horrible. Like, it's this like polarization that is keeping us distant from each other, and it is allowing these tools to be in the middle and to be like mediators, rather than for us to actually have these really hard conversations. What came before me, before my lineage? Reading history, reading about like technology and how technology has really ruined the world is something that has been in a moral panic every time. But is there like a validity to this moral panic because it is happening at this level, at this scale? I'm reading Blood of the Machine right now, and it's comparing how this like the technology shift that happened when automation was introduced. Basically, it was very similar to AI. In the book, like, there's a lot of claim around like this is nothing new, but it's also a very valid panic because it changes a lot of things. It changes the way that labor infrastructures are built. It changes the way that our political system is built. I think it's really important to read and to know these things so that you are not left like this is the first time this has ever happened. Reading honestly like liberates us and opens us up. Again, like I feel like it's like almost taboo to say that, but like honestly it does. It is an imagination for a better world. It makes you less governable, which means that you are going to say, let failure annihilate me, as Clarice Lispector said, because you are not afraid of being in line or indoctrinated. You just put stuff out, you talk about things with friends, and you are spending more time, I think, living when you are reading, because you're creating when you're reading, hopefully. I think it's a domino effect. Like, they talk about like all these habit things, and like you should read self-help books so that you can read more self-help books, which is like, that's not what we want. I think it's actually fine to be ungovernable and to also have the audacity to exist and to be present with your friends, for it to be awkward, for it to be sticky, and for you to be open to rejection. There's so many things that come with that. I think it allows you that, like, this is not the first time, but I think that is something that I take very, very personally. I think there's a liberation aspect to all of that. To be ungovernable means to be loud, to be seen, to be pervasive, and to be like actually like ready to be challenged, but also challenge others. I feel like the way that we challenge each other when we are watching and regurgitating the same thing looks and feels very different than when we are engaging with different types of like books and poems. I don't know, like fan fictions. My friend and I were talking about how like, what was the thing that gave you like a lot of joy and ease when you were young? And for me, it was reading. It has always been like reading and writing and going on little side quests of like creating little crafts. And when I wasn't doing that, I felt really empty, and I was trying to find an answer through someone else's experience that for the most part had a lot of like luck and were in the right rooms, because that's just most of how life works. And so reading those kind of gave me a lot of discouragement, whereas like when I was like reading other people's stories, and even like, I'm using Ourselves to Death, and Neil Postman talks about how the narrative is shifting right in front of you, even though what the truth is. And that's the same thing they talk about in 1984. That's the same thing they talk about in Brave New World. Excess information, excess things sometimes actually stifle us to the point where we're incapable of creating more. And I feel like creating is kind of the point of life, even if it's not necessarily you're creating a film that everybody is gonna see or something, but like you have to create something with your hand. You have to create like a journal entry, you have to cook something, you have to do something that is beyond scrolling. I'm curious, what are you reading right now, if you're reading anything? If not, what do you want to read, or what's something you've been wanting to read for a while? With that being said, I am going to go out for lunch with my sister and have some burgers.